The morning of the third day started like any other, on the frozen world of Kepler 442c. Kilmoth, a young Zephyrian technician with translucent blue skin, floated gracefully above the excavation site. His species didn't need to walk like most aliens. They could hover using natural bioelectric fields in their bodies. This made him perfect for working in the tight spaces around the ancient ship. Just a routine sensor calibration, Kilmoth muttered to himself as he adjusted the scanning equipment. His delicate fingers, designed for precise technical work, moved carefully across the control panel. The morning shift had just begun, and most of the excavation team was still warming up their equipment. The power coupling he touched looked like any other piece of alien technology they had uncovered. It was embedded in the ship's hull, barely visible beneath layers of ice and metal. When his tool made contact with the strange device, nothing seemed to happen at first. Then everything changed. A pulse of energy shot through the ancient vessel like lightning through a storm cloud. The ship's hull, which had been dark and lifeless for millions of years, suddenly began to glow with soft blue light. The energy spread along pathways carved into the metal, creating beautiful patterns that raced across the entire surface. "What did you do?" shouted Thoxel from his monitoring station. The four-armed Quillarian's purple skin had turned pale with shock as his instruments went crazy with activity. Deep within the ship's core, systems that had been sleeping longer than most species had existed suddenly roared back to life. Massive generators hummed with power as ancient computers began their startup sequences. The ship's hull plating started to move and shift, like a living creature stretching after a long sleep. Hidden weapon ports opened with mechanical precision, revealing weapon systems that looked more advanced than anything currently used by galactic militaries. Sensor arrays unfolded from the hull like metallic flowers blooming in fast motion. Each movement was smooth and purposeful, showing that whoever built this ship had created something truly magnificent. Dr. Vexhai dropped his datapad as a deep, resonant hum filled the entire excavation site. The sound was unlike anything he had ever heard, powerful and musical at the same time. It seemed to come from the ship's massive engines as they began their startup sequence for the first time in millions of years. "Everyone back away from the vessel," Vexhai commanded, his insect-like voice cracking with panic. "Move to minimum safe distance immediately." The excavation robots, programmed to respond to emergencies, immediately began retreating from the ship. Their mechanical legs carried them across the ice as fast as their motors could manage. Workers from dozens of different alien species ran, flew, and crawled away from the awakening giant. "Emergency broadcast to all Galactic Council ships, Doctor," Vexhai shouted into his emergency communicator. His clawed hands shook as he tried to maintain his grip on the device. "We have an active precursor vessel. Repeat, the ancient ship is powering up." The response from orbit was immediate. "Captain, Zektar of the Council research vessel." Harmony confirmed receipt of the message, but his voice carried disbelief. "Doctor, please confirm your last transmission. Did you say the precursor vessel is active?" "Confirmed. The ship is alive and responding to some kind of awakening protocol." As if responding to their conversation, the ancient vessel's external lights began flashing in complex patterns. The hull continued to reconfigure itself, revealing more and more advanced systems that had been hidden beneath its surface. Steam rose from cooling vents as the ship's internal temperature began to regulate, but the truly shocking news came from across the galaxy. "Sir," called out Kesri, the young Zephyrian who had been monitoring long-range communications, "we're receiving similar reports from 17 different star systems. Ancient ships are awakening everywhere." The excavation site erupted in chaos as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. On the desert world of Sarkai, buried ships were rising from sand dunes that had covered them for eons. In the asteroid fields of the outer spiral, massive vessels were emerging from rocks that had disguised them for millions of years. Even in the dangerous regions near the galactic core, ancient ships were stirring from their long sleep. Each awakening ship was enormous, easily 10 times larger than the Galactic Council's most powerful dreadnoughts. Their technology appeared to be far beyond anything currently known to galactic civilization. Advanced hull materials, energy systems that defied current scientific understanding, and weapon systems that made modern military equipment look like toys. Dr. Vexhai, Thoxel's voice was barely a whisper. Automated defense systems are activating around our vessel. A shimmering energy barrier began forming around the ancient ship. The barrier was translucent, but clearly powerful, crackling, with energy that made the air smell of ozone and electricity. Similar barriers were reported forming around every awakening vessel across the galaxy. The excavation team tried everything to communicate with the ship. They broadcast messages in every known language, used mathematical sequences, even tried music and art. But the ancient vessel remained silent, its only response the continued startup of more and more systems. Deep scans revealed that the ship was running extensive diagnostic cycles, checking every system and component with mechanical precision. It was like watching a sleeping giant slowly wake up and test its muscles before standing. The question that terrified everyone was simple. What would happen when it finished waking up? As reports continued flooding in from across the galaxy, one thing became clear. This wasn't just the awakening of a few random ships. This was the systematic activation of an entire fleet that had been waiting in silence for millions of years. The galaxy would never be the same. The morning frost still clung to the excavation equipment when disaster struck. Kilmoth had been working as a technician for only 6 months, his young Zephyrian instincts still learning the complex procedures of archaeological work. His translucent blue skin shimmered in the early light as he floated above the ancient ship's hull, carefully adjusting the quantum scanning array. "Just routine maintenance," he whispered to himself, his delicate fingers working on what looked like a simple power coupling. The device was embedded deep in the ship's hull, covered by strange crystalline formations that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. When his calibration tool made contact with the coupling, nothing happened for exactly 3 seconds. Then the entire universe changed. A brilliant flash of energy erupted from the contact point, racing along hidden pathways carved into the ship's hull like veins of liquid lightning. The energy moved faster than Kilmoth could react, spreading across the massive vessel in waves of blue and silver light. The young technician was thrown backward by the force, his natural hovering ability the only thing that saved him from crashing into the ice. "Emergency! Emergency!" screamed Thoxel from his monitoring station. The 4-armed Quillarian's purple skin had turned almost white with terror, as every instrument panel around him exploded with warning lights and alarms. "The ship is powering up. All stations report massive energy surge." Deep beneath the ice, in chambers that had been dark for longer than most civilizations had existed, ancient systems began their awakening sequence. Massive fusion reactors, each one the size of a small building, hummed to life with power that made the excavation team's equipment look like toys. The ship's computer cores, built with technology that defied current scientific understanding, began processing information at speeds that would make modern supercomputers seem slow. The hull plating started moving in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Sections of metal that had appeared solid began sliding apart, revealing hidden compartments filled with advanced machinery. Weapon ports opened like mechanical flowers, each one revealing cannons that could probably destroy entire asteroids. Sensor arrays unfolded from the hull with graceful precision, their crystalline surfaces beginning to glow with active energy. Dr. Vexhai dropped his morning meal packet as a sound unlike anything he had ever experienced filled the excavation site. It was a deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from the very core of the ancient vessel. The sound was so low and powerful that it made the ice beneath their feet vibrate. Several smaller aliens lost their balance as the harmonic frequency affected their inner ears. "All teams retreat to safe distance," Vexhai commanded, his insect-like voice amplified by the emergency speakers. "Deploy emergency protocols immediately." The excavation robots responded first, their programming detecting the dangerous energy levels. The mechanical workers moved with surprising speed, their metal legs carrying them across the slippery ice as they evacuated the dig site. Some of the larger construction robots formed protective barriers around the slower-moving alien workers, their hulking frames providing shelter from whatever might happen next. Kesri, the crystalline Zephyrian communications specialist, suddenly received an urgent message on his long-range communicator. His normally calm demeanor cracked as he read the incoming data. Dr. Vexhai, we're receiving emergency broadcasts from across the galaxy. Similar events are happening on 17 different worlds. The news hit the excavation team like a physical blow. This wasn't an isolated incident, it was happening everywhere at once. Emergency broadcast to all Galactic Council ships. Dr. Vexhai shouted into his emergency communicator, his clawed hands struggling to maintain a grip on the device. We have an active precursor vessel. Repeat, ancient technology is activating. The response from orbit came immediately. Captain Zektar of the research vessel, Harmony's voice crackled through the static. Doctor, confirm your transmission. Are you saying the buried ship is operational? Confirmed. The vessel is alive and running startup sequences. As if the ship had heard their conversation, its external lighting systems activated for the first time in millions of years. Strips of light raced along the hull in complex patterns, creating a display that was both beautiful and terrifying. The ship's surface continued to reconfigure itself, revealing more advanced systems with each passing moment. Steam began rising from newly opened vents as the ship's environmental systems came online. The ancient vessel was literally warming itself up, preparing its internal atmosphere for the first time since before the current galactic civilizations existed. But the truly shocking news continued pouring in from across the galaxy. On the ocean world of Aquanis, massive ships were rising from the deepest ocean trenches. In the asteroid mining fields of the Kepler system, vessels larger than space stations were emerging from rocks that had hidden them for eons. Even near the dangerous black holes at the galactic center, ancient ships were stirring from their long sleep. "Sir," Kesri called out, his voice trembling with fear and excitement, "each awakening ship is approximately 10 times larger than our biggest dreadnoughts. Their technology readings are off our measurement scales." The most frightening development came next. Shimmering energy barriers began forming around each awakening vessel. The barriers were translucent but clearly powerful, crackling with enough energy to disintegrate anything that tried to pass through them. The excavation team's most advanced sensors couldn't penetrate the shields or determine their power source. Dr. Vexhai watched in fascination and terror as their ship completed more of its awakening sequence. Every attempt at communication failed completely. The vessel ignored radio signals, mathematical sequences, even universal peace symbols. It simply continued its methodical startup, running diagnostic cycles that checked systems beyond their understanding. As reports flooded in from across the galaxy, one terrifying fact became clear. This wasn't random. This was the coordinated awakening of an entire fleet that had been waiting in silence for millions of years. The question that kept everyone awake was simple but terrifying. What were they waiting for, and why were they waking up now? Dr. Jinhuan stepped off the transport shuttle onto the frozen surface of Kepler 442c, his breath forming clouds in the bitter cold despite his environmental suit. The human xenoarchaeologist had spent the last 15 years of his life studying dead languages and forgotten civilizations across the galaxy. Ancient scripts, lost symbols, and mysterious writings were his specialty, but nothing in his career had prepared him for what he was about to discover. The journey from Earth to this remote world had taken 3 weeks, and during that time, reports of awakening ships had flooded galactic communication networks. Every major power in the galaxy was sending their best scientists to study the phenomenon. Jin was part of a joint Galactic Council expedition, the only human among a team of brilliant alien researchers. "Welcome to the most important archaeological site in galactic history," Dr. Vexhai greeted him, the Thektar's compound eyes reflecting excitement and worry in equal measure. "The vessel has been active for 3 weeks now, but we still cannot communicate with it." Jin followed the insect-like archaeologist across the excavation site, passing massive robotic excavators and monitoring equipment from a dozen different species. The ancient ship dominated the landscape, its hull stretching beyond the horizon like a metallic mountain. Energy barriers still surrounded the vessel, crackling with power that made the air taste of electricity. "The symbols on the hull," Jin asked as they approached the ship. "Have you made any progress translating them?" Thoxel, the four-armed Quillarian assistant, gestured helplessly with all his limbs at once. Our translation matrix has analyzed over 10,000 known languages and scripts. Nothing matches these markings. They appear to be completely unique. When Jin first laid eyes on the hull markings, his world stopped spinning. The elegant script carved deep into the ancient metal wasn't alien at all. His hands began shaking, as recognition flooded through him like lightning. "These aren't alien symbols," he whispered, barely able to breathe. His voice carried across the quiet excavation site, causing several alien researchers to turn and stare. "This is Terran. Ancient. Terran script, but definitely human writing." The revelation hit the excavation team like a physical blow. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, as dozens of alien scientists processed what the human had just said. The script that had defied their most advanced translation systems was human writing from Earth's ancient past. "Impossible," breathed Kesri, the young Zephyrian technician, whose crystalline skin had turned pale with shock. "Humans have only been spacefaring for a few hundred years. These ships are millions of years old." Jin approached the hull with trembling steps, his archaeological training warring with disbelief. The writing was definitely Terran, but it was older than anything in Earth's historical records. As he reached out to touch the ancient script, something extraordinary happened. Bioscanners hidden in the ship's hull suddenly activated with a series of soft, musical chimes. The sound was beautiful and otherworldly, like wind chimes made of crystal singing in harmony. Lights began racing along the hull in patterns that seemed to follow Jin's movement. The ship's massive communication array, which had remained silent for 3 weeks despite every attempt at contact, suddenly came online. Speakers embedded in the hull crackled to life, and a voice spoke in perfect galactic standard. Clear, authoritative, and unmistakably artificial. Automated Defense Protocol Omega acknowledged. Human genetic signature confirmed. Bioscan complete. Identity verified. Homo sapiens Terran origin. Awaiting orders from Terran Command Authority. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. Every alien at the excavation site stared at Jin with expressions ranging from awe to fear to complete disbelief. The wind howling across the frozen landscape was the only sound as the implications of what they had just heard sank in. Dr. Vexhai's compound eyes widened to their maximum extent. "The ship. It recognizes you. It's been waiting for humans to return." "This changes everything we thought we knew about galactic history," Thoxel whispered, his forearms hanging limply at his sides. "Humans aren't a young species at all. You're the descendants of the precursor race." Jin's mind raced as he processed the revelation. Earth's history only went back a few thousand years in written records, but these ships predated every known civilization in the galaxy by millions of years. Somehow humanity had once possessed technology that made current galactic powers look primitive. "Run a genetic analysis on all human DNA patterns in the galactic database," Jin said to the ship, his voice gaining strength as his scientific mind took over. "Cross-reference with your stored command personnel files." The ship's response was immediate. "Analysis complete. All current human genetic patterns match stored Terran Command Authority profiles. Genetic drift consistent with expected evolution. Over 2.7 million years, human species confirmed as descendants of original Terran Empire builders." The excavation site erupted into chaos as alien researchers began shouting questions in multiple languages. Communication devices buzzed with urgent messages being sent to governments across the galaxy. The balance of power had just shifted dramatically. "Dr. Jin," the ship's AI continued, its voice carrying the weight of eons, "this vessel and 847 sister ships across the galaxy await your people's return to active duty. Shall I activate fleet-wide awakening protocols?" Jin stared at the massive warship, realizing that humanity's true heritage was about to reshape the entire galaxy. They weren't the newcomers everyone believed them to be. They were the children of an ancient empire returning home after a million-year exile, and their sleeping fleet was ready to serve once again. The young species of the galaxy were about to learn that their elder siblings had finally come home. Admiral Li Na was reviewing routine patrol reports in her office aboard the Earth Defense Station when her world changed forever. The veteran military officer had spent 20 years protecting human colonies from pirates and raiders. But nothing had prepared her for the message that suddenly appeared on every screen in human space. "Admiral Lee Na of the Terran Naval Forces," a voice announced from speakers throughout the station. The voice was artificial, but carried an authority that made her spine straighten automatically. "You are hereby designated as ranking Terran. Command authority. Genetic markers confirmed. Military rank verified. How may we serve?" The bridge of her command station erupted into chaos as junior officers tried to locate the source of the transmission, but Lee Na knew exactly where it was. Coming from the ancient ships that had been awakening across the galaxy. Ships that were somehow connected to humanity's forgotten past. "This is Admiral Lee Na," she responded, her voice steady despite the confusion swirling in her mind. "I need a full status report on all awakening vessels." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Fleet status: 847 vessels across 23 star systems now online. All ships reporting full operational capability. Defensive protocols activated around human territories. Awaiting further orders. 847 ships. Lee Na's mind struggled to process the number. The entire human space navy consisted of barely 30 vessels, and most of those were patrol boats and cargo escorts. This ancient fleet was larger than all the galactic powers combined. Across human space, impossible things began happening. On the mining world of Kepler Prime, workers watched in amazement as what they had thought was a natural asteroid field suddenly began moving. The rocks weren't rocks at all. They were massive shipyards that had been camouflaged for millions of years. Entire sections of the asteroid belt revealed themselves as construction facilities capable of building vessels larger than cities. Captain Park Min, commanding a human cargo ship near the Centauri system, nearly crashed his vessel when his sensors detected something emerging from the system's outer gas giant. What had appeared to be a small moon was actually an orbital defense platform the size of a small planet. The station's weapons arrays alone could probably destroy an entire invasion fleet. "Sir," his communications officer called out, her voice shaking with disbelief, "the station is requesting permission to escort us to our destination. It's offering protection services." Similar scenes played out across human territory. Ancient installations that had been hiding in plain sight for eons began revealing their true nature. Automated mining stations emerged from planetary cores, their robotic systems still functioning perfectly after millions of years. Communication relays that had been disguised as natural satellites came online, creating an instant network that connected every human world. The most shocking revelation came from deep space, where entire fleets had been waiting in stasis. Near the edge of human territory, a debris field that scavengers had been picking through for decades suddenly came alive. What everyone had thought was the wreckage of ancient battles was actually a dormant fleet in perfect hibernation. Dr. Kim Soo, her xenobiologist studying alien ecosystems on the frontier world of Haven, watched in awe as massive ships rose from what she had thought was a natural coral reef. The reef had been providing protection for the colony's harbor for generations, but it was actually a camouflaged fleet base. The ships that emerged were sleek and powerful, their hulls gleaming with technology that made current human vessels look like antiques. The ancient vessels moved with a precision that took Admiral Lee Na's breath away. Without any orders from human command, they began forming defensive formations around every human world and trade route. Their movements were coordinated across multiple star systems, as if they were all parts of a single massive organism. "Admiral," reported Commander Cho Young from the Lunar Defense Station, "the ships are sharing tactical data at speeds we can't even measure. Their AI systems are communicating instantaneously across thousands of light years." The implications were staggering. The ancient fleet possessed faster-than-light communication technology that current science said was impossible. Each ship's AI was connected to every other ship, creating a network of artificial intelligence that spanned the galaxy. Other galactic powers watched these developments with growing alarm. The Thektar Hive Council called emergency sessions as their military advisors calculated the threat level of humanity's awakening fleet. The crystalline beings of the Zephyr Collective, who had considered themselves the galaxy's most advanced technological civilization, realized their best ships were outclassed by millions-year-old human technology. The humans have been hiding their true nature, declared Chancellor Vexmore of the Kilarian Federation during an emergency session of the Galactic Council. They're not the young species we thought they were. They're the descendants of the ancients who once ruled this galaxy. The balance of power had shifted overnight. Humanity, which had been considered a minor player in galactic politics, suddenly possessed the largest and most advanced fleet in known space. Every major trade route, every strategic system, every important resource had ancient human ships watching over it. Admiral Lee Na stood on the bridge of her command station, watching tactical displays that showed the true scope of humanity's inheritance. The sleeping giants of her ancestors had awakened, and they were ready to serve. The question that kept her awake was simple but terrifying. What responsibility came with such overwhelming power? The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's long exile was over, and their ancient guardians had returned to reclaim their place among the stars. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been running for 3 straight days, and tempers were reaching dangerous levels. Representatives from across the galaxy filled the massive chamber on the neutral world of Concordia, their voices raised in heated debate about humanity's suddenly revealed heritage. "We cannot allow this ancient fleet to remain operational," declared Chancellor Vexmore of the Quilarian Federation, his forearms gesturing dramatically. 800 ships with technology beyond our understanding poses an unacceptable threat to galactic stability. Admiral Lee Na watched the proceedings from the human delegation area, feeling the weight of billions of lives resting on her shoulders. Around the chamber, alien military commanders were discussing mobilization plans and defensive strategies. Some species were calling for immediate action against the human fleet before it could become an even greater threat. The Thektar Hive Queen spoke next, her compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights. "Intelligence reports indicate several member species are already moving their battle fleets toward human territory. If this continues, we face the first galactic war in over 1,000 years." That night, alone in her quarters aboard the flagship that had become her temporary command center, Lee Na made a decision that would change everything. She had been avoiding the ship's data cores, intimidated by the vast stores of information from humanity's ancient past. But with war looming on the horizon, she needed answers. "Computer, grant me access to historical records," she commanded. "I need to understand why the human empire went into stasis." The AI's response filled the room with holographic displays showing star maps, population charts, and historical records spanning millions of years. What Lee Na discovered made her sink into her command chair with shock. The ancient human empire hadn't fallen to invasion or civil war. They hadn't been defeated or destroyed by some galactic catastrophe. Instead, they had made a choice that demonstrated wisdom beyond anything the current galaxy had ever seen. "Admiral," the ship's AI explained, "the Terran Empire discovered that advanced civilizations inevitably stagnate without challenge and diversity. Our ancestors chose to enter voluntary stasis, seeding younger species throughout the galaxy and waiting for them to develop spaceflight and wisdom." The holographic displays showed the scope of humanity's ancient project. They had found primitive species on thousands of worlds and gently guided their evolution, providing subtle assistance while remaining hidden. The Thektar, the Quilarians, the Zephyrians, and dozens of other species had all received this guidance during their early development. The awakening protocol was triggered not by threat, but by achievement, the AI continued. "When the younger species reached sufficient technological and social development, we were programmed to return as guardians, not rulers." Lee Na spent hours reviewing the records, her amazement growing with each revelation. Humanity's ancestors had deliberately chosen to step back from power, believing that the galaxy needed diverse perspectives and fresh ideas to truly flourish. They had been waiting millions of years for this moment, when they could return not as conquerors, but as protectors. The next morning, Lee Na stood before the assembled Galactic Council with new confidence. The chamber fell silent as she activated a holographic projector that filled the space with images from the ancient data cores. The awakening protocol was always planned, she announced, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. Our ancestors didn't want to rule forever. They wanted to guide and protect when needed. You weren't conquered by an ancient empire. You were raised by loving parents who stepped aside when you were ready to stand on your own. The revelation stunned the assembled delegates into silence. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Humanity's ancient empire had voluntarily given up galactic dominance to allow younger species to grow and develop their own unique civilizations. Dr. Jin Huan, who had been studying the archaeological evidence, stood to address the council. Every species in this chamber benefited from ancient human guidance. Your technologies, your social structures, even your philosophies show subtle influences from our ancestors' gentle touch. They didn't conquer, they nurtured. The mood in the chamber began to shift as the implications sank in. The ancient ships weren't weapons of conquest. They were tools of protection left by a civilization wise enough to know when to step aside. The fleet's weapons remain powered but silent, Li Na continued. We offer protection, not domination. Guidance, not control. The ancient promise our ancestors made millions of years ago stands today. We will guard the galaxy's peace and help younger civilizations grow, but we will never again rule as emperors. Over the following weeks, the ancient human vessels took their positions throughout the galaxy with careful precision. They stationed themselves along trade routes to protect merchant ships from pirates. They positioned defensive platforms around worlds threatened by natural disasters. They became the galaxy's silent guardians, watching over the civilizations they had helped raise. The galaxy entered a new golden age of cooperation and exploration. With the ancient fleet ensuring peace and stability, younger species could focus on discovery and growth rather than military competition. Humanity had reclaimed its role as the galaxy's elder siblings, but this time they led with wisdom earned through millions of years of patience. Dr. Jin Huan stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching as reports came in from across the galaxy. Ancient human installations were sharing advanced medical technologies, helping species cure diseases that had plagued them for generations. Environmental restoration systems were cleaning polluted worlds. Educational networks were sharing knowledge freely among all civilizations. The sleeping giants had awakened not for war, but for peace. Humanity's long exile was over, and their ancient promise to protect and guide the galaxy's children was finally fulfilled. The stars themselves seemed brighter, knowing that the galaxy's elder guardians had returned home. The end